The question that we were asked, and it's really great to be here. The question that we were asked is, what does it mean to say, build a movement for everyone? Well, except for that person, no. There's always somebody, right? So I want to ask you, part of nonviolence, as we have learned, if we've been part of thinking about and expressing active nonviolence, we have learned that nonviolence is a movement of resiliency, and that it's grassroots, and that it's people power, and that it's about civilian resistance to systems and structures of injustice. It's not just about how we feel personally. It's also about looking at what is unjust systematically. And even to be able to see that injustice, we have to create some kind of inner awareness. And we have to know the place that we are standing. Where are we in relationship to that injustice? And that's kind of what I want to address. Issues of frontline and solidarity movements, what that means to us as the FOR. So, to the extent that we are the Fellowship of Reconciliation. So, I would like you for just a moment to think about what convivencia means to you. And I love this word, convivencia, because to me, it symbolizes where I want to go. Convivencia is a Spanish word, Ladino also, Jewish Spanish. We have a little riff on a lot of things. A little Jewish riff on a lot of things. Like in New Mexico, we say enchilatka instead of enchilada. So I'm asking you, convivencia comes from the golden age of España, of Al-Andalus, Spain, where Jews and Muslims and Christians lived under Islamic rule and together created one of the greatest cultures of history in architecture and poetry and business and healthcare and science. And this convivencia is kind of a model for me and many people to think, a way we think about, for instance, the Middle East, what it could be, a place of convivencia. The United States is not a place of convivencia yet. There are shelters of convivencia. And so, if you want to build a movement that has convivencia in its heart, I want you to think positively for just a moment about what would that movement look like to you in order for there to be convivencia. What do you need to see in your life, in your personal life? What is necessary for you to feel like the United States and the world is a place of convivencia? So we're going to popcorn. I'll just give you a second to come up with a phrase, an image. We did this in Philadelphia for the Peacewalk, and the phrase we used there was, peace in the streets is, and then the young people, each one of them created an image. One that really spoke to me, sort of in the negative, is peace in the street is not being afraid to walk home. Peace in the street is walking home with your friends safely. So both the negative and the positive image. So I want you to think both that way. So convivencia is
respect for all.
No war for 200 years.
Sidewalk trees.
Integration.
Bicicletas.
No automobile
automobiles on any roads.
Okay, so convivencia isn't always,
Dying naturally.
dying naturally.
Co-housing.
Co-housing.
Healthcare for all.
Healthcare for all.
Sustainability.
Sustainability.
Food and shelter.
Food and shelter.
Economic equality.
Economic equality.
Dancing in the streets.
Dancing.
Yeah.
Edible landscape.
Edible landscapes.
Laughter.
Cultural respect.
I didn't hear the first word.
Complete
Laughter.
cultural respect.
Complete cultural respect, laughter.
End of poverty.
Plenty.
Dancing in the streets. No more hunger.
Warm and caring connection between people and the earth.
No more racism.
Growing and satisfying livelihood for all.
Room for children to play.
No need for guns.
Okay, thank you. Let's give each other a hand for the image we have of convivencia. So that is convivencia. We begin to have, and if we listen it's important to hear each other, share our convivencia. And here is the next question that I have. In pulling together and doing a lot of the work that I do, which we'll talk about a little bit later, formulas. I have a very concrete formula for bringing diversity together. It's a very arduous and intentional task, let's say, in order to really make people who are minoritized feel safe in a conversation with white people. So that is very much on my mind as I'm addressing you. But I want to ask you, what do you mourn? Because many of us carry a great deal of mourning and sadness for the violence that has been imposed either on our community directly or violence that we may have perpetrated or violence that we have seen as someone who is witnessing it maybe secondhand. So depending on where you are standing in relationship to violence, what do you mourn? What is heavy in your heart? And for this section, I would just like you, if you're able, to stand and say, I mourn. What do you mourn? Just stand and say, there's someone behind you. And then, or raise your hand. Okay, yes.
I mourn the sacred lives destroyed by war and drones on both sides.
And we say together, we mourn.
We mourn.
I mourn torture.
I mourn women who have been abused and violated.
We mourn women who have been abused and violated.
I mourn access to health care.
We mourn lack of access to health care.
I mourn the loss of hope of our youth in a future.
We mourn the loss of hope. Yes.
I mourn the separation of people because of racism.
We mourn the separation of people because of racism.
I mourn the fact that we haven't been able to end nuclear weapons in this world.
We mourn the fact that we haven't been able to end nuclear weapons in this world. Yes.
I mourn that there are young people who are judged as worthless based on where they live, the color of their skin, or their economic situation.
We mourn.
I mourn our history of bloodshed and greed throughout our history from the very beginning right up to now.
We mourn. Just stand up, yeah.
We mourn the baby orcas that die because their mother's milk is toxic.
We mourn.
I mourn the
We'll just say we mourn.
I mourn the corporatization of food.
We mourn.
Corporatization of food.
I mourn that the values of democracy and peace have been co-opted by the forces of the military-industrial complex.
We mourn. Just stand.
I mourn the pending loss of the Fourth Amendment to our privacy.
We mourn. Yes. Elder man. That's you.
Elder man.
I mourn being called an elder man.
What can you do? You live long enough. It's a blessing.
Thank you for blessing. I mourn the destruction of the rule of law and the lies which our public figures tell us to cover it up. We mourn.
Okay.
We mourn ageism.
Okay, so we've just, so thank you. That is a way, I wanted to just demonstrate a very simple way, really, that we can begin to talk to each other. And these are circles of sharing that we can begin to share what we mourn. Sometimes always when I'm working in communities, we ask the question, what is violence? And how does violence impact your life? And that is always a really profound conversation. And in order, and then when you see violence, what do you do? So for me, I like the definition that we begin with, for us, understanding what we've personally experienced, and then what is systematic violence. This is a very important question because systematic violence touches people and deprives them of the ability to fulfill their dreams, to achieve a fullness of potential. It denies access to resources that are essential for living, and it does so systematically on the basis of skin color, gender, on the basis of class. These are systematic violences that are often invisible to those who are privileged. And this invisibility means that those of us who are privileged, we don't really understand what it means to struggle. Because if you can walk away from all of the things that we named, if you can walk away or choose to ignore it, then you are privileged. Because it is a privilege, if we are privileged, then we have to understand where we are and how we struggle, what it means for us to take up a cause. Because we have to know whether we are on the front line, we are impacted by systematic violence every day of our life. We have to unpack that. Or if we are on a first responder, if we are engaging as a first responder, perhaps as a public defender or a healthcare nurse, depending on what we're doing, so we're doing that, or whether we're more on the sideline. And then when we step into an issue, how do we decide what we want to struggle for? How do we make that decision? And if you have the privilege to make that decision, that means that you're privileged. Because some people don't really have a choice. Palestinians cannot walk away from occupation. And Jewish people do not have the right to say how Palestinians are going to negotiate that conflict. And if we our solidarity, then we are driven to struggle we receive our marching instructions from the community that is on the front line. And that's what makes our action effective if we're in partnership as solidarity partners. And if I look around this room, I would have to say, for the most part, that FOR is a solidarity organization. And because most of us that are in this room, not all of us, but most of us can walk away if we choose. And that makes us incredibly, what is the system of accountability that keeps us honest and clear about how we struggle? And what does accountability mean? It means, in part, that we need long-term strategy for the long haul and a commitment not to walk away, and to be in it for the long haul, and to take our marching orders from people on the front line of violence, and to always be in partnership, in consultation, to understand, and to be incredibly humble about it, because our knowledge and the resource that we can bring, and all of us have resources to bring, is going to be impacted by our privilege. So we have to unpack the privilege in the places where we have mainstream power. Now, all of us have intersecting identities. We all do. Gender, religious status, economic status, racial status, age status, able-bodied status, all of these kinds of status are intersecting. And we have to unpack who we are and where we're standing if we're going to be effective. So finally, I want to just speak to a minute about adultism and ageism. Because, I've been a member of the FOR since my mid-20s. And I really want to honor my teachers, in particular, Reverend James Lawson and Zugby, who have been teachers for me since the beginning, and where I have learned my own understanding of what it means to be privileged, and how profoundly difficult that is, for white people to figure that out. And at the same time, I carry Jewish identity, and that means something in mainstream Christian culture. Even people who come from Christianity and white people who come from Christianity and don't acknowledge that they're Christian. I remember having this conversation with a Quaker, and I said, well, do you celebrate Christmas? And she said, of course. That, of course, right there, that, of course, that's your privilege right there. If you think that, for me as a Jewish person, what Christmas might mean to me is completely different. A lot of Jewish people are kind of forced into it in order to feel like Americans, but that's about mainstream power. Because we're minoritized, so we're doing a whole other different dance. We're doing a different kind of dance. So, and it's not a big deal. It's okay. That's just the most obvious thing. But let's ask a question, which I've been asked over the years, is like, where are the young people? And I really want to honor people who are in their 20s who came here. And I don't see too many, but thank you. Thank you so much for coming to us. But, I'll just say the obvious, the FOR is aging out. And the question of why that is happening and what our relationship to that might be, and I've heard this conversation now for 40 years, so, and it's still the same thing. So I think that is an example where we might understand we want something, but we, in our privilege, we do not take the necessary steps because we are not in relationship with enough young people to understand what that means. And the same goes for other minoritized identity in our midst. So if we are a solidarity organization, what does that mean? So I just want to leave you with that question. And this is my son. My greatest teacher. Anyway, that was a Jewish mother thing. Who really, I'd just like to thank the Fellowship of Reconciliation because, he also started coming, when he was just a little boy. And at one point he had this conversation with Farid Yitzhak, who's after the end of apartheid, was the first minister of gender. And he had this personal conversation with Farid, and he was giving him rabbinic advice about how to deal with the problem he was having with his father. But I just thought, really, it's just so amazing to be in a community that has people from so many places coming together, usually as speakers, and have the opportunity to enlarge your vision of the world. So thank you.
So I think that I feel obviously really humbled being here. It's an amazing honor to be asked to come up here when I've been coming to Seabeck for probably about 23 years, which is how old I am, to be... I remember playing on the slide when I was a baby over there, and shaking Tom Rawson's hand with my little fingers. I was still in a diaper and being like, "Oh my gosh, he's a rock star!" I still am like that, and then I remember I graduated to the youth, like the young kids area, where we had so much fun with my best friend Avery. We would do finger paint, and then I remember graduating to the A-frame. Then I was really big stuff, and we had really, really meaningful. It was an amazing experience getting to, and really crucial experience getting to interact with other peers who are interested in social justice. And then, of course, it was always amazing to see people stand up here. And we would get turns to be on the stage during the talent show and everything, but to actually be asked to share words like those famous people that came up here, like Rabbi Lynn or Kazu, whoa! So I don't pretend to have any more meaningful things to say than any of you, but I have been asked to address the question of how to build movements for everybody, and why aren't more young people here, and why don't we have more young people really attracted to nonviolent movement building like an Occupy? Why do we have more people in my peer group now that I'm hanging out with who really, really are angry and want to throw stones and have every right to feel angry? And so I, having 23 years of experience with some activism, I feel like working with the peace activist trainees, like I feel that within myself, like I have the right to talk. It's like I tried that before, So I can imagine how hard it would be having decades of experience being at it, for just not necessarily a long time, but just a really persistent time, and having learned a lot of lessons. It would be difficult to give up this stage and this microphone to someone who is naive like me. So thank you for doing that. So I acknowledge it's hard, but I just want to thank you because I think it's one of the first steps. So I'm going to play, to do a different dance, I'm going to play one of my songs that my friends and I like to, that speak to a lot of my friends. Is that okay? It's going to have a little bit of profanity in it, so anyone who's not okay with that maybe should take your innocent ears out. There's no rest for the weary, just another day grinding up stones till they turn to dust. It's tough times in the rough, diamonds ain't enough to cover up a corrupted and effed up legacy of strange fruit, bloody whips, and smallpox. Trigger-happy cops, barbed wire, and fire water. Y'all, it don't stop. When the colonizer came with the cross and the sword, I threw the first spear and said, I declare war. So... So check the work ethic in the name. The lessons might change, but the essence of the message is the same. So when they say anything, say, why is it? Class is in session till the teacher gets a pink slip. I ride the rhythm, imbibe a little wine talk, head hit the concrete to line with your spine. I speak to find peace, but it's war all the time. It's deep like the drive from Renton to Shoreline. I'm a more mindful guy ever since finding out that I'm about to be a father, and doubt is not an option, and now I can't be getting crunk or faded as often. So get your hands dirty, 'cause a prayer ain't enough. Boss, what cross? We got crucified by buckshots. 1 million Jesus and Judas God is off. Pages torn out with the memories of those who remain, shackled by chains of international capital gain. They claim civilized with their animal ways. Peace to Oakland, I never been a fan of the A's, but some days you can find me inscribing my soul on the page of every crime has an alibi. Disciplined and organized is how I handle my New Jacks is spending mad time on they battle rhymes. I can't knock it if you find it entertaining. I rep those whose labor ain't compensated. Meaningful and into social justice themes, and I really, really think that's important. But I had a lot of friends who were totally not into, activism or anything, but they knew every word to every song at that Blues Scholars concert, and they were up there, just mouthing every word perfectly. And I was thinking, first of all, how do you do that? And at least maybe it's someday it'll click or sink in. But I also, it hadn't fully sunk in for me. And I'm rereading those words after now working and going to El Salvador for a May Day and working with union members and airport workers at SeaTac who are being discriminated against in horrible, horrible ways, while meanwhile people fly first class and the CEOs are making billions of dollars. And then also in El Salvador, airport workers and are being fired for trying to form a union. And these huge companies are getting more and more of a profit. I didn't think about all of that, even in college. I thought that economics was totally separate thing from conflict. I thought international conflict and war is just something that if we told people, just get along, that if only everybody could watch a force more powerful, the world would be changed, right? Everybody would stop fighting with violence. And so anyway, I just was kind of thrown aback. And when immediately after college, I got to work with the peace activist trainees. And I also got to become a staff member with Western Washington FOR for a little bit of time as the Bring Our Billions Home campaign outreach coordinator. And one of the kind of hidden goals that was in the fine print of the contract that we wrote was bring more young people in, maybe, try to do that. And I was kind of, I thought about what does bring young people in? I had just been able to go to Serbia and Bosnia with a peace and conflict resolution program, and had learned from some of the OPPOR members who had helped nonviolently overthrow dictator Slobodan Milosevic from power. And they had, basically the whole country went out with and caravans to the city streets, and they had such a great campaign that was so humorous and cool, and it was led by young people, it was led by students, and the people who were getting beat up by the police and jailed, they went and with their families took cookies and flowers on National Police Day to the doorsteps of the police who had beaten and arrested them. And then on the day of that revolution, when everybody was caravanning, the days leading up to that, there was a strike in the power plant, which supplied 70% of the power, no pun intended, of the country. They went on strike, and the police were ordered by Milosevic to fire on the protesters and the strikers. And they didn't, and they decided to kind of join them. How revolutionary is that? And that wasn't really based on any kind of Jesus thing or any kind of Jewish thing or any kind of faith thing, which maybe that is a problem, But it was really, really interesting to think that we can also just be for nonviolence because it's cool and it works. Not because we believe it and God told us it's good, but because it works better than shouting at people and blowing up the people who blew us up. So I looked, and then I remember going to Capitol Hill Block Party in Seattle and seeing all these young people, gold mine. And what are they doing? They're smoking pot, they're drinking, but they're feeling high on the group dynamics, and they're speaking along to blues scholars. And I had that vision. I was like, oh my gosh, well, the music festivals get young people out. That's really the only thing that I'm seeing now that's getting them out, besides now Pride Parade, because they, see the vodka commercials and the rainbows, and it's just, that's what it is now, unfortunately. And so that's what I think we really are moving towards, and I want us to move towards, is being thinking about what gets people out, and it has to be fun. And I know that I'm running out of time, but I wanted to say that when I was talking, how many of you have friends who totally you love and you hang out with them, you go out to dinner with them, and you talk about relationships and gossip, but they wouldn't be caught dead here. They don't understand why in the heck you would go on 4th of July weekend to be like talking about, fair trade. Yeah, so I have a lot of those friends, not only from the time when my best friends were Mormons and Bush supporters, but my time when my best friends were at Willamette, and a lot of my friends still are just, I will come from going to a protest at Walmart about Bangladeshi workers who have just had their friends killed in a fire because H&M and Walmart aren't agreeing to this fire code, and they're just treating workers horribly so that CEOs can make a profit. And then Emily texts me, and then I should have changed her name. And then no, she's a dear friend. And then I am a hypocrite, and I go and we shop at H&M and eat sushi. And I know I'm a hypocrite, and I'm working on it. But but it's really important to me to keep those relationships, because I told her, I never really talk about this. I didn't tell her about Seabeck and all, but I had a call with Lynn to talk about her keynote right now. And she was like, oh, okay, so I guess I'll see you later. What are you doing? And I'm like, oh, well, I'm supposed to give this talk on how, the peace movement we can try to not scare people away with our hippie side, and we cannot scare people away with our we want to F things up and throw stuff in windows side. And she's like, I'd actually really like to go to that. No. Yeah, so next year maybe. But maybe she will come to an organized event or a direct action in Seattle next time if we are able to make those actions. We can work on our tie-dye, number one. I'm sorry. I know a lot of people are wearing tie-dye. I have a lot of tie-dye as well. I've had to work on it, and I'm going the 12 steps. And I also think that maybe the drum circles that I saw at Occupy could be opened up a little bit, and they could be hip hop, but also they could be things that speak to the older generation as well. And just the last thing that I want to say is I have built my kind of identity on being an activist and the state of being against something. And that was kind of what I was going to do my life. Like, that was my life. It was going to be about that. And then I realized the most powerful thing we can do is think about who we are and what we stand for and what we want to do if all of the injustices went away. If we didn't have war, if we didn't have to worry about organizing protests, what would we do? What would you do? Dance, bake bread, play the banjo, go swim in the actually use the rowboats maybe. Yeah, so I think that if you're a nurse, like my partner, go to protests in your scrubs. If you're a lawyer, go to protests in your suit. If you work at Amazon, I have a dream that we'll have protests and people from their offices will walk down and join it because it will be so moving and they'll get the message. And it won't be, oh, the crazy people or, oh, the angry young people. So I'm really excited about that. And Hunter and I were talking about Kazu's keynote and about the great CO workshop yesterday, and we were just saying, I guess what does shape young people when you're at that crucial point, when you're 14 or 15, looking for what your identity is going to be? And Hunter was like, I guess whoever makes the pitch first. Is it a military recruiter, or is it some cool like Community Alliance for Global Justice like organization that has these awesome teach-ins and like hackathons that then you find your group and identity there? I just want to thank Seabeck and FOR for making the pitch first. So we were gonna have a dialogue between us and then open it up for questions at the end.
So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
No, thank you, thank you.
No, thank you.
Okay, I'm not going to tell a joke. That reminds me of a joke, but I won't. I'm just going to take a serious moment just for a second in reflection on some of the things that you spoke about. And can you hear me okay? Okay. I want to speak for just a second about what it means to come from a minority culture. And, we have a lot of fun. One of our 5-year-olds, at one point, somebody asked her what it's like to be Jewish, and she thought about it, Tovia, and she said, well, all we do is party, party, party. But she thought being Jewish is, you go to this big party on Friday night and you dance and you eat good food. But the thing of it is that it takes incredible amount of time and investment for a minoritized people in white America to have a culture, because we get assimilated. We get assimilated by the force of the mainstream. So whether we're an Ashkenazi Jew or a Sephardic Jew or a Mizrahi Jew, we're bilingual people. We have a different calendar cycle. We have different needs that are not met by the mainstream culture. Some, a little bit, but not really. So when we think about what does convivencia mean, it means the ability to practice our culture safely and with respect and honesty and decency. And what does it mean for those who are coming from other cultures to feel like how you be in solidarity with that? And a lot of times in gatherings like this, for many minoritized people, we find each other almost immediately. And when I was running an Interfaith Wilderness Peace Camp, the young white Christians all of a sudden had the experience for the first time of being in the minority. And the Jews and the Muslims were like, yeah, we got 2 languages, we do things differently. We just do things differently, that cultural communication. So I really want to encourage us, again, when we're thinking a sort of big group ideas, to understand that we are, honestly, we're not all alike. And we really do have to spend time with each other to understand the cultural rhythms, the history, the stories, the challenges that we carry to exist, just to exist in an identity. Because many times people think it just, It means somehow but that things will be okay. And yes, and we can bring in lots of things to do movement building, but part of that has to be finding ways to really support the culture and the struggle of people. And I just love the ideas of that Kaeley mentioned. They're so important. And to go to those places that you don't normally go to, take the risk and go to places that you don't normally go to with a humble spirit. That's why I go to Palestine every year. I cannot work on this issue without spending a lot of time trying to learn who my partners are. I mean, a lot of time. And with great humility, and to know that I'll never really know, and I'm never really gonna understand fully. But I can spend a lot of time trying to build those bridges by sitting in the houses, listening to the stories, being on the front line to the extent that I can, so that I can be an honest partner. So that's just a thought I had in thinking about what it means to build a movement for everyone. Okay, I'm gonna so we can be on the same note. So Kaeley, do you want to say more about, thank you. Thanks so much. Do you want to say more about what structural changes you think would have to happen here to broaden the impact of the Fellowship of Reconciliation and to make this a more welcoming place for young people, in addition to learning hip hop, which is never too late?
Yeah, it's been really interesting because we kind of wanted to invite some new people this year to lead some workshops, and some of the people that we were excited about to have conversations around interracial organizing and just kind of younger, more edgy action organizing weren't able to show up this year. But I think that that kind of keeps on happening with FOR. Even in the peace activist training program, in the last couple of years, when we would have some young applicants of color come to the interview, and they would show up at the Woodland Park Presbyterian Church in Finney, and with mostly all white and kind of mostly older interviewers, it might have been a little bit, not. Yeah, it wouldn't encourage participation, and that's really, really difficult place to be in, because then it's like, okay, well, can I change color? Like, try so hard. Or, can we bring some other people in? But then is that tokenism? Is that just shallow bringing people in and then not? I think the key to that is bringing the people who aren't as represented here, but then honoring what they have to say, and actually not just bringing them here or placing them on the podium, and then it's very, very difficult to do. And I think that everybody here has the most radical and best of intentions. I just think that it is very difficult. But I would also say something that is again about music that I've noticed when I was organizing. I thought of how to bring people in, and sometimes bands have like groupies, and followings. And when you can invite someone, hey, you're an excellent spoken word artist, could you come and perform? And then that's often an in for their friend group to come and just come to see them. Or, hey, you give this really great workshop on interracial organizing. Can you come? And their community, like, we can start a conversation on that. But I think that Tom Rawson is the best, and I love, and I apologize because I haven't really brought this up. But I think inviting some different genres or some different young people to be kind of leading different parts of this, I think is a great first step. But I don't know.
You know, when I think about it, I think about the women's movement, which I was sort of thrust into at the age of 24 when I became one of the first 7 women rabbis in the world. And by the way, people used to, they would ask me, so what do you do? And I say, I'm a rabbi, and they would look at me deadpan and say, are you a woman rabbi? So then I would either say no, or I would say, just a second, yes. But I think it's really hard to, for us to think about bringing people to us, actually. And as a solidarity activist, I always go the other way around. When I started the Muslim-Jewish Peacewalk, for instance, thank you, Moshe. It's in Tucson. Also, that was after spending years going to the masjid. You know, I would bring my youth group over to the masjid. Then we would invite people over to our house. We had a very, very specific piece, and our work in the Muslim Jewish Peace Walk, which is now the Interfaith, the Interfaith Walk for Peace and Reconciliation in Philadelphia, for instance, was a lot about being in solidarity with the Muslim community because they're experiencing so much homophobia. It wasn't about asking, for instance, Muslims to join us. We were trying to create enough knowledge, cultural knowledge in our community so that we knew how to support them in their space. And so because of the solidarity work in Albuquerque that we had done with many different communities, when 9/11 happened, we were able to invite into our community 12 of our closest Muslim friends to speak from the Bima with incredible support from our community about how 9/11 impacted them with no assumptions, you know. And then also hearing the variety from that community so that we were not sort of generalizing about them, that we could support, both be communally supportive and individually supportive. And then the Peace Walk was really involved in honoring the masjid and walking to the masjid and creating a relationship based on solidarity. So I just caution the idea of thinking that we should bring people to us and to really understand how to work well as a solidarity community. And so both of those perspectives to me are important. The other really brief thing I want to say is, you know, Young Pacifist and Proud was my initiative, which is kind of funny. I'm 64, right? But I like, I'm just so inspired by younger people, and of course my son. And but I had a very specific formula. And we were filled up, by the way, in 3 weeks. And I work with Sean Pierce. And our message, when we put it out there, we were filled up in 3 weeks. It was a space that was 2-to-1 people of color, 8 Muslims. Christians were in the minority. Even the Jews were Jews of color. You know, we barely had to recruit because we already had a reputation. And so people came together knowing that it was going to be a safe space and that we could co-create together. And I feel like if the FOR is really going to manage to survive into the next century, that there has to be a space for young people to create what it means for them to engage, and we should support that and fund that and be occasional elders sitting in the circle to give them the support and courage that they need to be in this world. That's a different approach, a slightly different approach. And then, after doing that work, maybe we'll find ways of being together, which is what happened with the Muslim-Jewish Peace Walk.
Yeah, I actually really agree, and I almost take back what I was saying. It is about getting back to FOR's radical roots about the things that worked, I think, in FOR's organizing, it seems, is when FOR would be in the struggle with people and not just, bringing people in. And I feel like when we were in Occupy, kind of bringing trainings to people, telling them, this is the way, breathe deep, stand tall, don't yell at the cops. It was such an insult. It was such a deep insult to a lot of young people and people who didn't have, it's not necessarily about age or race or changing color, but it's about acknowledging the privilege that a lot of us come from and a lot of us don't. And then doing that work that is radical in addressing socioeconomic inequity and the things that are real. So I'm curious as to how, if you were to give advice for me or, let's say, Brenda or Mary Margaret, what can you do without buying a ticket to Palestine, to go to the places where FOR is not, rather than thinking about who is not at FOR?
That's a great question, and what I hear, and as many of you probably do, is that we really need to be looking at issues of incarceration, mass incarceration, and deportation, and immigration rights. And one of the big complaints I hear, about the FOR community is that, and often white peace activists in general, is that our attention, I think Kazu said this too, our attention tends to be overseas. And of course there is the global connection, we understand that, but we need to be building and supporting. We are now at a time where warehousing is globalized. We're now at a time where the police all over the world are being militarized in similar systems. And we're being, oh, by the way, if there's any NSA people here, hi. We need to be thinking together about our own local communities. Where is the violence most severe? Who is experiencing the most severe impact of deprivation from systematic violence? Is it food deserts? And then find out what people on the front lines are doing and figure out how to support that. So in the program that I created for Stony Point Center called Farm the Land, Grow the Spirit, we co-created with the community that came to us also another 6-week, 2-month program for people age 18 to 30. We'd go to Eastern Prison and as a start, and to hear from incarcerated persons, what do they need from us? What is happening there? What are families doing? How do we support people who are experiencing the most severe kind of injustice here, and finding out, not assuming that we know, but finding out how we can be in solidarity. And what do you think?
I think part of the most, the other day I was at the CISPIS office doing administrative work, which is very easy to do. Oh, sorry. I thought you were asking me what administrative work was. I'm happy to tell you. I'm sure you know. CISPIS is the Committee in Solidarity with the People of El Salvador. And I'm the coordinator of the Seattle chapter. Thanks to Ellen, who's great at finding me jobs. No, she encouraged me to apply. And so I've been kind of struggling because CISPIS was founded in 1980, and they are allied with the guerrilla force, the violent Farabundo Marti National Liberation Front, FMLN, that was the leftist party that was totally in the right as the leftist group, but their tactics were violent. And we are still, the organization is still technically allied with it's now not a guerrilla force, it's a political party that is implementing universal health care and literacy programs that are really cool. But that's been a huge conflict within myself. But I've had to kind of take a step back and think, I could be telling people in Occupy to not yell at the cops, or I could be hanging out with the people who are yelling at the cops as friends and going out to dumplings with them and talking and going to their hearing after they've been arrested at May Day and going to my friend who's actually like houseless. Like we're actually like friends. Like I'm not just like I saw them on the street and I called them my friend. Like a friend who you realize, oh, they don't have a key to their apartment and they're just having me drop them off in the neighborhood because they're embarrassed to tell me that they're homeless. And I could be sitting in the CISPIS office, or I could go to this Salvadoran committee meeting, even though I really have to work on the fundraising. The fundraiser that's happening tomorrow, it's a bike-a-thon with all the major donors. But I'm just gonna go to this meeting, even though the previous coordinator had, the previous chapter had been positioning themselves a little bit away from them, because I think this is happening amongst a lot of radical organizations, is that they're like, if you don't understand what neoliberalism is, then talk to the hand. And so there, I went to the Salvadoran committee meeting instead of staying at the office and working on things I had to do. And they're a little bit less political. They had experienced war, and they don't want to have really anything. They don't want to have anything to do with the FMLN because they had experienced them trying to get, soldiers and recruiting people and a lot of violence. And but I went to the meeting because I really think it's so embarrassing if the Committee in Solidarity with the People of El Salvador isn't organizing with Salvadoran Americans or Salvadorans. That's very embarrassing. And so I went to the meeting and I was sitting, and I'm learning Spanish. Estoy aprendiendo is like the most important phrase that I know that Hunter taught me. And it was, I was just sitting there and I was feeling like, I drove all of these miles up to North Seattle, where this is a completely different experience than being in comfortable U District. And that was exactly where I needed to be, just sitting there, listening and supporting. And that was kind of a wake-up call just in the last week for me, so I'm constantly learning.
I think you pointed something that's really important, that a lot of our work is about relationship building, that we're not really in a vacuum. And so it's about the relationship. I've been working on Palestine solidarity work for 45 years, and which is a long time. I started when I was 16, and I'm 64. So I don't know, maybe, however, it's 50 years? Oh, God. At any rate, people ask me, so this is a long struggle. Don't you have, do you get discouraged? And I always say, I have friends that are there, that are experiencing that I can leave and I can come back here. And I can go to Jerusalem, and they can't. And I feel so accountable to them. And it's about having relationships. And the same is true in the African American community and the Latino community. It's not sort of an issue. It's friendships. It's relationships. And the young people that I've encountered through my work over the years, these are people that I'm in relationship with as they're growing up, like you are with Kaeley. I feel committed and bound to them. And That's a really important. Relationship building is so important. And the other thing is, what does your strategy look like? Because a lot of people, too, don't really, and I feel like the FOR doesn't exactly yet either, have a social movement building model that we're working from, so that when we create actions, are we engaging one-on-one? Are we resting at the level of education? Are we doing the network and coalition building that we need to do, and what does that mean, and how do we do it? Are we focused on policy change or reform? Are we focused on bringing down the whole institutionalized racist system that we're living in? And if we are looking at the broad change, do we have a clear enough idea, a movement building idea of the steps that we're taking to get there and who we're walking with? Because it's a long haul journey. And we have to also understand what our resources are and who we have access to, because some of us, like myself, we're a bridge. I have so much experience in the Palestinian community, having been a witness there for all these years, that I can be that bridge when I return to my own community where I have tremendous amount of access. I can bring that knowledge, and then with that knowledge, I can access the resources of my community in solidarity with the struggle there. And that is why I love Jewish Voice for Peace, because, yay! And by the way, we just had our national membership meeting, and half of the people that were there were 30 or under. Yeah. And that is really something to think about, because, and later you can ask me why that is. And finally, I just want to say, I only have 4 more of these with me. The Trail Guide to the Torah of Nonviolence. I'm going to be up here afterwards if you.
So thank you so much for being a patient audience, and we can open it up for questions, and maybe